The man most responsible for the Kells we know today, believe it or not, is the 5th century legendary High King Niall of the Nine Hostages and his descendants. And for the next 500 or 600 years after Niall, they ruled Ireland, and they have left their traces all around Kells, and there are so many questions to be answered. Along the way, I'll answer questions you've always wanted to ask, but I'll also answer a lot of questions you never knew you had. Very important ones, not just about Kells, but about Ireland and about our faith as well. Answers to questions like, when did Christianity really come to Ireland first, and from where? And why was it that St Columcille and contemporaries had no knowledge whatsoever of the all-conquering St Patrick from the previous century? How did St Patrick manage to convert a pagan nation in the midst of a golden age? We'll get to the true origins of St Columcille's faith and why nature itself was so important to the early Irish Christians. Why did so many monasteries spring up around Kells all at the same time in the middle of the 6th century? What's the real story behind St Columcille and St Finn's disagreement over the book? And was Columcille really exiled? And why did he choose Iona? I'll explain to you why in the 7th century the Roman popes called the Irish of the native Irish Church Jews and heretics, and why for 500 years Rome sought to break the spirit of Kells. Why was the name of St Patrick never heard in Ireland until after a major falling out between the Columban Church and the Church of Rome at the Synod of Whitby on the east coast of England in 664 AD? Why, more than 200 years after the death of St Patrick, did the creation of his very first hagiography at Ardbraccan, just a few miles from Kells, lead to civil war among the great Southern O'Neill and Meath, and the murder of a high king by his own clan in one of many, many battles around the Kells area, all in the name of St Patrick or St Columcille? Why did Kells find itself in the middle of this argument, and why did it lead to an English seaborne attack on Meath and Kells in 685, which devastated all the monasteries in this area? I'll explain how Iona's decline began long before the Viking raids in 795, and why Kells was the obvious choice as his successor as head of the Columban Church. I'll point out historical hints and also real scientific evidence and common sense which points to Kells being the origin of the great book that bears its name. I'll explain how, by the year 800, Ireland was already in the midst of its own Christian Reformation, a nation divided in two halves with Kells on the front line, and how in the decades that followed, this cross marked the unification between the two sides in an effort to repel the Viking invaders. I'll explain how the 9 marriages of 3 queens called Gormleth defined the fortunes of Kells for over 2 centuries. All about the dozens of raids, attacks and battles that were fought around Kells here over the centuries by foreigners and natives alike, and also the slave raids on Kells here, in particular one in 951 where the Vikings of Dublin took away over 3,000 captives back to Dublin, to Europe's biggest slave market, and how Kells overcame it all to become known as Kells of the 100 Kings, the Splendour of Ireland, by the 10th century, and how it was effectively the most important political and religious centre in Ireland until the Munster upstart Brian Boru took the High Kingship of Ireland in 1002 from the O'Neills and broke 500 years of hegemony among the descendants of Niall and the Nine Hostages, and what a negative impact that ultimately had for Kells. Who was it that really stole the Book of Kells in the early 11th century, and why was it so easily returned? And more importantly, why is no mention made of the fact that over 40 pages of St John's Gospel were deliberately torn from the book before it was returned? I'll tell you all about how, in the year 1076, the murder of a MacLachlan, heir to the Southern O'Neill High Kingship, spelled the beginning of the end for the once all-powerful Southern O'Neills, and how in the decades that followed, the O'Rourkes and the O'Reillys of Breffni poured into North Meath and into Kells and made it their own. And how it all came to an end here at the Synod of Kells on this very ground in 1152, when now without the support of their Southern O'Neill guardians, the once all-powerful Columban Kells was reduced to little more than a parish church by St Patrick's Armagh with the support of Rome. It's a story of Irish kings, Scottish kings, English kings, Viking kings, and their wives of course, and the popes in Rome, and money-hungry bishops, and martyred monks, and murderers, and scoundrels, and scammers, and marauders, and everything else you can imagine. This is the real Game of Thrones. This is the rise and fall of Kells of the 100 Kings, the Splendour of Ireland. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope now with your support I can add your name to the pages of the rise and fall of Kells of the 100 Kings, the Splendour of Ireland. A story that's long overdue in its telling, not just from the point of view of Kells, but for Ireland itself as well. Gur mila mila mahagat, is Michel Mas Christo Romoroku, Aaron Kinanis was Columban Monastery of Kells, Slán go fóill.